feel
anybody else
lots of pressure.
Yeah, I push the record button, it's recording. Great.
Great. Yeah, it's just going to save us time if we have to get anybody else up to speed on this. So.
Now we're going to have to be extra careful, Trevor. We're going to have to really put on our A game here.
Be very professional. Okay. All right. Well, then let's get started. So yeah, thanks, Mark, for passing it over to me. K2 is one of my favorite things right now. Obviously, you guys know that we're pretty heavy into iManage, and this is the nice shiny thing that goes on top and allows us to take not just iManage, but our business processes to the next level in law firms in general. And so I'll take you through K2 and what it is at a high level, and then we'll go from there. So in summary, it is a powerful business application framework, and that's important because with many of these workflow solutions that you get that. It's an out-of-the-box workflow solution that just does workflow. With K2, you get an application framework that allows you to actually build the integration and interaction points with your workflow. So while it is obviously a powerful workflow engine, it has a lot more to it than just that. It is a data aggregation and line of business integration platform. So a lot of big words to mean that you can have different systems that you're using, and it brings it all together. And then, of course, it brings the forms that people interact with, the workflow that moves the processes along, the data that's involved in the process, and the reports that allow you to take advantage and analyze the information about that process into a singular common framework. So you don't have to have multiple applications to improve your processes anymore. And then it's a no-code based designers to minimize ease of development. So I will just add a caveat to this one that says they have no-code based designers, but it is actually more of a low-code environment. So that means that you can be a person who is, let's say, an administrator, and you have the capability and capacity to improve the performances within your firm. But if you are a programmer, you can take it to an even greater level. And I'll go through a little bit about how that can be accomplished as a developer. So let's say instead of no code, let's say low code. This interesting thing is called the K2 meatball, and it is a nice graphical representation of what we're talking about here. So on the top of the system, we have our workflows, we have our forms, and we have our reports. We have our business applications, and the business applications might be K2 business applications that you've developed as part of your process, but they might be things like Aderant or Worksite, which are also business applications, any accounting system. And then underlying all of that nice stuff is the data in which we use and create in our daily lives. So forms, workflow, data, and reports, and a nice little graphical representation that shows you what we're talking about here. So here's the challenge that most firms face today. They have lots of great systems. You know, they have their Aderant system, they have their iManage system, they have their Active Directory, they have their Exchange environment. Sometimes they have some integration, sometimes not. There's always a way to get into them. They all have data. Some of them may or may not have workflow. Some of them may or may not have reports. And different groups interact with them in a linear fashion. They interact with the systems independently of each other, and they each log in and use those systems how they need to. Some people don't use specific ones, but some people do, and they use each of them independently. And what K2 does is it allows you to bring your processes together across those applications that you have on the back end. So here we just have some example: matter management, document management, approval, onboarding, and offboarding. So how to leverage existing system? You build business applications that bring information that is available across the enterprise and web into a single user interface on any device. I talk a little bit more about which devices can be used, but here's another graphical representation of how you can bring your CRM, your iManage, your SQL databases, accounting systems all together in one common framework. And how is this accomplished? It's accomplished through a proprietary technology called Smart Objects, and Smart Objects are essentially just that. They are links into your system that are intuitive in the way that they approach your system. So for example, if I have an SQL database and I connect a Smart Object to my SQL database, it'll ask me, which table do you want to connect to? And I will tell it, and then it will say, okay, based on the way that this table is set up, you can do the following things. You can create, you can edit, you can modify, or you can delete. And it also depends on your access level. Now, say, for example, I have a table in SQL that doesn't have a unique ID on it. Well, then it will say, you can't really create here because K2 will have no way to uniquely reference the thing that you are creating. So instead, I will say that you can only list the contents of this table through the smart object. And so that's what I mean by intuitive. It actually thinks about what it is that you are trying to, that it actually thinks about what it is possible for you to do with that specific thing that you are connecting to. From there, we build our business applications in the K2 framework, and we present those out to people in various ways through forums, which people can interact with, on mobile platforms, which also have the forms, reports, portals that you may want to put together, and then, of course, the workflow engine, which a lot of people think K2 is all about. You know, of course, again, it is, but it's a lot bigger than that. Some use cases in the legal, obviously matter intake, matter lifecycle management or legal project management, matter 360 or lawyer 360 views, case management, contract management, document approval and routing, and then of course what we're going to talk about today, offboarding and onboarding. Here are some of the out-of-the-box integrations that come with K2. So we have Active Directory, and Active Directory allows you to, you could have a process, for example, an onboarding process. And sorry, I think somebody just might need to go on mute there. It's just I'm just having a little bit of a hard time hearing. So on the Active Directory, let's say you have an onboarding process, and part of the onboarding process is after it's gone through these certain phases and it's got to a certain step, maybe I want to actually create an ID in Active Directory. Well, out of the box, you have the integration with Active Directory. So therefore, you could create that as part of your business process workflow for onboarding an employee. You could create them an ID in your Active Directory system, which then, of course, would flow to your iManage environment if you have the directory synchronization services set up, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you're doing an offboarding process, maybe you want to deactivate the person's ID at some point in your workflow. Out of the box, you can do that because you can integrate with Active Directory. So smart objects are already there for you. Exchange, you can do things like smart actions. So you can send an email to a user and they can respond back with the action that they'd like to take, and your K2 instance will look into Exchange, grab that, and process the workflow along. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Or it can be something simple as, you know what, part of this workflow, somebody has to do something. And I want to make sure that they really know they have to do it. And I don't necessarily, I'll send them an email and say, look, you got to do something. I'll put it on a dashboard maybe that says, here's your list of tasks that you actually have to accomplish. But many people are event driven. And so how about I also stick a calendar entry or a to-do on their Outlook inbox. So that you can do that as well. So out of the box, I can say, look, is this my process? As it creates the steps, send an email to the person, but also create a calendar entry on their inbox.
Now, Trevor, can I just a question for you. It's Pat here. Are these all sort of vendor published API level integrations, all sort of by the book? Okay.
That's right. Yep. SQL is another one, and SQL is the one where I would say, yes, it is vendor published, yes, it is commercialized and follows by the book. However, SQL is obviously the data layer, and so there's some thinking involved in this one, right? Because you've got to make sure that essentially you're, unlike an API level integration like Exchange, where it actually authenticates you through the API layer, the SQL connectors would basically say you would have to authenticate them at the SQL level. So it's basically the same thing, but SQL can be all your tables and all your databases. So it is out of the box, but just something to consider. And you can connect to different things, like if you had Oracle environments, or if you've got SAP running in your environment, Microsoft CRM, Salesforce, and then Exchange Online, Office 365. Those are all natively integrated.
Hi, I just have one quick question.
Okay.
Can we run like a web service included in any of this?
Yep.
Like if we have to. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, you can. So I'll get into this, and you'll see this next one. Whoops, where'd it go? Okay, there's my integration. Give me a sec while the deck catches up here. So here we have you'll see Arbro Connect. So Arbro Connect is a product. So there's out-of-the-box ones that come with K2, and then Arbro takes it to the next level specific to the iManage environment. And so Arbro Connect is actually a web service, and the web service integrates with K2, so I think that kind of fits nicely with your question, Marilyn. And so we have a web service that is running, and K2 calls that web service, and that web service interacts with the iManage API. And so you can do things, essentially, I can say boldly that all of the things that you can do in FileSite, you can do through Arbro Connect. So you can check in a document, check out a document, do a full text search, and you can do that in your K2 framework. So you can build a little web page, and you can, and I'll show you that today, you can surface things to them, and you not just surface that to them, but interact with them from an iManage level, utilizing the API through the web service and keeping in mind the security protocols that are inside iManage. So if I'm in iManage and I have access to a document and I go to my K2 form, then that document will be presented to me in K2. If I don't have access to that document or that workspace or that folder, then it won't be presented to me in K2 because it is being authenticated through Arbro Connect. And then we have another product called Arbro Launch, and these are the two that we like to showcase because generally in terms of integration with iManage, these two are the biggest sellers because Arbro Connect allows you to integrate two-way with your iManage environment, and Arbro Launch allows you to start K2 processes within iManage. So if I'm sitting on a workspace and I right-click a workspace, then I can say, maybe I have a process called document approval, and I have a document in Worksite. I go to Worksite, I right-click the document and click Send for Approval. That will kick off my K2 process. So that's Arbro Launch, and I'll show you a little bit of, after we've done the main demo, I'll show you a little bit about that because there's some pretty cool things that you can do with that. Okay, so those are two of the products that we sort of tack on to K2 that assist. We also have a document generation product called Arbro Create that allows you to template certain things like say an agreement or a contract and allow your K2 process to populate that contract with information from your K2 process utilizing the form and the parameters that you've already set up, and that automatically puts the contract into iManage for use in your additional steps in your process. And that one's not on this screen pad. So those are the additional integrations that Arbro offers.
And Trevor, just one additional question on integrations, and this can be a placeholder for later. How would integrations that are not out of the box be addressed is a question I would have. So Aderant would be a good example there. Yep. LexisNexis Interaction is another primary for us. There's lots of little ad hoc stuff, but those are two of the major players that one of your competitors already has out of the box integration for. So I need to hear a little bit about how you'll address those later on.
Okay, no problem, and we will. Okay, so moving along, we'll talk a little bit about smart forms. So smart forms are the way in which you present the data and allow users to interact with it. And you'll see on the screen here that we've sort of divided it up into 3 blocks, but it doesn't have to be divided up this way. The data can be interspersed from different locations, but here we have some data from our accounting system, some data from our practice management system, spelled the English way, and some data from iManage presented on the same form, and they're all tied together by the common links. So let's say, for example, matter number, or in the offboarding case, we'll use the lawyer responsible. So they're all tied uniquely together by that information. All the data is aggregated on the single form, and you can interact with it from here, and you can also further interact with it through your K2 workflow. So this is a big one. So Mark asked me, how long did it take you to build the offboarding demonstration for Miller Thomson? Because we didn't have one before you guys asked about it. But we thought obviously we don't want to just give a generic K2 demonstration. We like to take it to the next level since you guys have seen K2, or most of you have. So he said, how long did it take you to do that? And I said, just under 10 hours, because a lot of the things that I put into the demonstration I was able to utilize from previous demonstration exercises or other work that we've done. And that's done through views. And so views are basically, they are the window into the data that you want to interact with. And they can be populated or modified based on an initialization value. So I can have a view that says, give me everything from Worksite, and then when I'm loading the form, I can say, in that view, only give me things related to this matter, which allows me to further refine how that view is presented to the person. But the reality is I only need to build it once. which means that when I create a new view, I populate that across my forms, like new expense claim, maybe across first approval and second approval, and I benefit from that because let's say I add a field, it gets on every form. So just a way to make your life easier in building applications. K2 is device agnostic. Generally speaking, whatever device you use will be sized appropriately and rendered in the capacity of that particular device, which means that you get a synergistic approach to the way in which you interact with your processes. You're on the you're an administrator. You're sitting at your desktop and you've got a big monitor. You're working on it. You submit the form. It goes to a lawyer. Lawyer's just about to go into court. They have the ability to do that. So we talked about powerful workflows, build powerful workflows with ease, flexible, scalable, and intuitive. Just an example of it. And again, that is why I generally leave the workflow engine to the last, because a lot of people, identify K2 as workflow because that's where it started, but ultimately it's a lot bigger than that. So just 2 more slides, I think, Mark. So we've got 4 ways to interact with the workflows. The one on the top left is sort of let's call it the administrator level. So I'm somebody who's going to build a workflow, but I really need to drag and drop and do wizards and things like that. I'm not really going to get too in depth, but I'm going to be able to do everything that I need to do, like send approvals to people and have reworks and interact with the data on the system. But it's very graphical and very wizard driven. The one on the top right is called the K2 Visual Studio, and that allows me to take it a little bit more in depth. So in this case, I'm more like a technical administrator. I'm somebody who knows the systems, who knows the code, and maybe I want multiple steps to happen in one event. So I send an email to a person, and when they actually say approved, it's going to go to Aderant and update a flag, and it's going to go to iManage and update something. And I want that all done in one step, because after that's done, then I want it to go to the next approval level. So that allows you to go a little bit broader. The one in the lower left is the Visual Studio. So if you're a computer programmer and you wanted it to do something like call a web service and open an application on a remote system, that's the kind of thing you can do through that left one. And then the one on the right is just if you have SharePoint, you can do it right from SharePoint. And then we talk about rich reporting. We can monitor the progress and performance, deliver business insight, create reports from both process and line of business data. And it does also integrate with Crystal Reporting and SQL Server Reporting Studio, and utilize industry reporting tools. That's that last comment there. So essentially, you have the ability to not just have a process, but understand the times, durations, and activities that are going on behind that process so that you can analyze it and improve that process. So for example, if I have a approval step and 9 times out of 10 it's approved in 5 minutes, but 1 time out of 10 it takes 4 hours, and I notice in my process that 4 hours is always assigned to one person, maybe I have a training opportunity and I can go address that process with that person. Okay, so that's that is the deck. That is K2. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay. So Mark, do you want to answer the Aderant integration before we jump into the demo?
Sure, we did. We knew this question was coming up. We discussed it before, didn't we? Yeah. So I think the answer is we don't have a module that integrates. We don't have an Aderant module, but we can build one. I think that's what we discussed, right, Trevor?
That's right. So essentially, in partnership with you guys, we would be happy to build a connector to Aderant. We did something similar with Geldards in the UK. They have Elite Enterprise, and they didn't want to go through the SQL layer. They wanted to go through the API layer. So we worked with them in partnership to develop an Elite Enterprise connector, and now that's something that's commercialized that we support for them. And we walk away with a little bit of intellectual property, so that's something that we take into consideration when we're pricing that particular effort with you. Is that in the end, we anticipate that we'll have something that we can market, and therefore it's more of a partnership than a consulting exercise like building an offboarding application for you. That's more of a consulting and engineering type exercise, but building a connector is more of a partnership. There are ways to integrate with Aderant natively out of the box using the SQL service objects. Generally, people are okay with that. We had a client who had Axia, and they didn't want, you know, at Arbro we said, look, we don't really care to integrate with Axia. We don't have enough clients using that, so we don't really want to enter into that partnership. But we could assist you with the service objects to connect and do all the updates through the SQL layer, and they were happy with that, doing it through the service objects. And in the case of a firm called Mitchell Moores, we did do an Aderant integration with them. So we are very familiar with the tables, and we do have a connector, but they had some unique code in their environment that didn't allow us to offer it as a commercialized product. So we could say we're probably 30% of the way there, and with your vendor relationship, and you know, just to be transparent with the respect that you guys would garner from the software provider, I'm sure we could put something together relatively quickly for you.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to take a lot of things. Sorry, Pat, go on.
No, that's kind of what I expected here. Would we go through a similar process for a product like Interaction if we wanted to pursue that as well?
Yeah, the answer is yes. At the end of the day, what we've been saying since the beginning is when you look at the whole picture in terms of, you know, what systems will we be integrating with. No system out there is going to provide integration with all the systems you have. And so it comes down to building something, and not necessarily, when sometimes there are modules out there that integrate, but you don't love it. I would say that with things like Aderant, Elite, we're going to come across them all the time because, let's face it, a lot of workflows are going to originate there's going to be involvement with those systems. But as I say, we have done integration with all kinds of systems. And, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So, what's the typical timeline on a project like that look like? Like 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah, the Elite connector took 6 months. Okay. But that wasn't just the Elite connector, that was the whole application. That was the testing and things like that. So about a bulk of that effort was on the Elite. Okay.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so now I'll jump into the demonstration if everything's working here. So keep in mind this I did build this in less than 10 hours, and you know, it doesn't have every step that you asked for. It's essentially designed to showcase the proving point that, you know, the concept can be done so that you can see it. But ultimately, there's obviously lots more steps and processes that need to take place within that. So I would say that and in addition, it may not exactly represent how you would see the process flow in your firm, but it will give you an idea, and you can you can sort of extrapolate from there how to build it up in your world, and we would obviously be willing to explore the demonstration further if so desired. So let's just imagine for a second that we get an email in the offboarding administrator's inbox. It says, go ahead and offboard Pat Stevens, and they say, okay, no problem, I'll go do that now. I'll go into my K2 application or my offboarding application. Maybe I've got it in my Outlook Navigator, or maybe I've got it over here on a web page, and it says, so the first thing I'm going to land on is something I just generically like to talk about, which is the ability to create a dashboard at any level. So I can create a leadership dashboard or an organization dashboard. I can create a task-specific dashboard or task-specific for a user dashboard. The sort of ceiling is not set. But here I have a case where I'm showing to the offboard administrator. In this case, I'm logged in as Arbro Demo Admin. I'm showing to the offboard administrator, look, you've got 25 tasks that you need to take care of. Here's all the priorities that you have, and unfortunately, they're all overdue, so you better get to work quick. I've got some information about some of the workflow tasks that I have. I have 6 instances that are greater than 8 hours, and I have 37 instances that are, you know, being done in 31 minutes. Over here, I've got how many activities do I have in each phase. So I've got client direction letter. I've got 43 in that. I've got 29 in my in my export, and I've got a bunch in my AR validation. So these are just graphical representations of the things that I can see. So let's say I go ahead and do a new offboarding request. I click the button. There's many ways to surface this. You can surface this in your iManage environment. You can surface it in its own application. You can surface it in this thing called Workdesk. But here I just chose to surface it in a dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. I'm going to grab this list. This list can be, all these lists can be pre-populated from different sources. In this case, it's grabbing from iManage. So I'm going to select Pat Stevens, and I'm going to say, okay, the request came in today, and we would like to have this person offboarded by the 30th of the month. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click create, and a couple things are going to happen as soon as I click that button. So it's going to go and assess in iManage how many, in this case I went to iManage, but I could go anywhere. It's going to say how many matters does Pat Stevens have in our environment that could potentially be offboarded for this user, and it's going to create those and attach those to the record that I created. And you can see the status was moved to draft, and so now I've created a process instance of that particular offboarding request, and I've gone ahead and got my matters that are associated to that user. So I can just save that and close it and come back when I'm ready, but maybe now I want to submit it into my workflow, so I go ahead and do that. And it just says, look, your workflow for offboarding P. Steves has been created with ID 5. So now I've got some workflow items. So now maybe I want to go back to my dashboard, and I should be getting emails shortly from the system telling me that I have now, there they are right there. So I have these 2 requests that have come in that I have to actually go action. These notifications can be generated to the, to whoever is responsible for that task. They can be consolidated too. I've sent 2 here in this case. But just imagine, for example, I'm the lawyer and I just got 2 letters saying, you need to go and validate that you have received the client direction letter. And once you've done that, tell the offboarding administrator that you've done that. With the notifications, just quickly, there are a couple of options that are available to you. You can open them up and you can click on the link and go to the form itself and then action the workflow there. You can respond back with the event, with the thing that you want to do. So I can just hit reply on my email and say approved, and it will come into K2. K2 will see that it's approved, and it will move it on to the next step, which is very beneficial if I've already reviewed the process and I'm in flight and I want to get that approved for them quickly. I can just respond back to the email that I received. Additionally, I have other functionality that I can do. So let's say I'm sitting, I'm going into court and I have my phone, I got it, and I get an email that I have to approve a document. I can actually respond back, sleep 1 day or sleep 24 hours. And then what will happen is it'll tell that task that I'm going to not do that task for 24 hours. Everybody who needs to know that now can see that it's been slept for 24 hours, and I won't be bothered by emails for that period of time. But after that period of time, I will be re-notified that I have an action that I have to go take care of. I can also delegate it on the fly too, so I can respond back, delegate T-Bell, and that will send the task over to me, and I haven't had to do anything but respond to an email. So there's different ways that you can interact with the email, but I'm gonna, for this demonstration, I'm just gonna interact at the file level. So now I'm going to go to my offboarding progress, and I have now, this is we saw that it was number 5, so it says, look, you got 2 matters that are in the offboarding process that you have to address. We've got 992 and 993. So I can go in here and I can do those same functions as the person can do from their phone. I can do it from here. So I can sleep it, I can redirect it, I can share it with other people. But in this case, I'm going to open the form. And the form is going to load up, and it's going to give me the information about this particular item. And it's going to say, there's different ways to present to users how they can actually interact with the workflow. You can have a button at the matter level. You can have a button at the header level. In this case, I just went with the native workflow box that pops up at the top. So if I want to, so let's say, for example, I want to do this one here. If I click on this record, what's going to happen is it's going to aggregate data from different sources. So the first thing that it does is it's going and checking the accounting system to see if I have any outstanding AR, which I do. And then it's going to go over to the iManage, and it's going to see if I have information in iManage. So this is actually using Arbor Connect to use the API to see if I can see those documents. And I can see that the client direction letter was received. So on this step, I'm going to show you a manual process. So I'm going to double click there, and I'm going to say, great, good, my CDL letter has been approved. So I'm going to say received. So now that particular process has moved on, and if I refresh my view here, you can see that it's now in AR validation. So I only put 3 steps into this workflow. So because I don't want you guys to be here forever. But so now I'm going to say, okay, now I'm the person who is responsible for AR validation. I just got my email, tells me that there it is right there. I need to go and do my AR validation. So imagine now I'm the AR person and I either click the link, respond to the email, come into my form, whichever it's going to be. And I come in, I open the form and I come in and say, we all know that there is outstanding AR here, right? So I'm going to actually go in and I'm going to go to our mock accounting system. I'm just going to check what that invoice number was. It was X408A, which I think is 8. So maybe I'm gonna, now I'm the accountant, and I'm not the person responsible for the process. I'm just somebody who's clearing AR. So there's my invoice, and okay, we got our bill. They got, this person owns nothing now. Owes nothing. So in my form, when I actually go ahead and click that, let's go back into that form here. So what I wanted to show here was that when I click on this now, it actually automatically set the AR to true. And the reason why it did that is because it went through the accounting system, it found all the invoices, it summed up what's outstanding, and it told me that the system, that it is true and it can go past validation, past AR validation. So I showed how to do it by clicking the button, but the reality is that if I can do it by clicking a button, really what's happening is a smart object's being called, it's assessing the value in the accounting system, and then it's determining what to do within that step. So there is no difference from me clicking it to actually sticking it in a workflow task, which means then theoretically I could have my, not theoretically, in fact, I could have a workflow that will go to the next step in AR and perpetually check that user's AR until it is 0 and then move it along to the next step without people even actually needing to be involved, if that's something you guys want to do. But here I just showed how it could be done with the click of a button. The smart object was called and it was assessed through that process. So now I'll just say that the process is confirmed, AR is confirmed, and that's it for that one. So now I've gone on to the next step. So from here, you can see I'm now at the exporting step, and I'll get an email. The IT person would get an email, and then they know that they can go and clear that that export task. So you can see, hello, Mr. or Mrs. IT person. You can offboard this. You can export this content for this matter now because everything's been approved. One of the important things here is that, of course, if you have a product like export management is actually, which I think you guys do, is actually a task-driven thing in WSM anyways. And so all that would have to do is be a data definition that's looking for anything in the K2 process that has a flag of AR approved or ready for export. And then it will just export that to a file store. And maybe the IT guy is the IT person is notified, okay, the content was exported, go and put it on the SFTP site. So there's just, I'm just articulating that there's ways to pretty much automate everything here, although most processes people do want a human component, especially when it comes to validating things. So we've got that now. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that particular item and just say, yeah, okay, actually just for the sake of the process, I'll just say, yeah, okay, I exported that content, and now I'll finish it off. So I know that I know that you are seeing all of the emails and you are seeing me go into all of the screens. You can imagine in this demonstration, I am actually I am everybody. I'm playing every role, so it's all coming to me. But these would all be going to different people. This task list here would be filtered down to just what they're responsible for. You can see that task list is now gone off my system. So let's say, for example, now I have a lawyer who's saying, what is the status of my whole offboarding request? Well, maybe I want some aggregated views of my events, right? So here I've got maybe I've got a view that says here's all the historical statuses of the offboarding events at a workflow, at an offboarding request level, or maybe here's all the matters that I have for that specific offboarding. So maybe I can say, look, let's go to Tom here and say, I want to search for offboarding matter 3, and I will see by searching for this field that I've got 2 matters that were offboarded by for this particular person, and I can see M1X1 is still outstanding, so I'd be able to tell the lawyer, okay, those 2 are still outstanding. M1X2, maybe they say, okay, well, that one's past the AR and past the, let me just go check that one so I can double click on it. It will load the form up for me. And then MX12, I could actually go and check the information about the workflow itself. So I can say, okay, well, it looks like it's pretty much done. So I can go see who did that, when they did it, and how long it took. Get a little bit of information about, you know, you can populate who actually closed it off, like if it's going to a group of people, maybe you want to ask them specific things. You want to talk to the IT person who actually exported it. Maybe there's multiple IT people that are exporting it. Anyways, the situation here is that they are each workflow item is attached to all of the historical events, and you can see them aggregated in line with what is actually taking place in the system. So let me actually go and grab our example that we had from I think it was Peace Thieves. So you can see from Peace Thieves, we know that all of that information is aggregated, so we can say at any point in time, if I want to go back and look at something, I can do that. I can go back and see from a historical perspective what happened with that offboarding. And you can imagine that you could have any aggregated data here from any line of business system, also from Exchange or Active Directory or you know, Aderant. They can all be aggregated here so you can actually see what transpired. In fact, you can take it to a further level to say, show me from the workspace, from the export management table, which content was actually exported. So you can maybe put a little flag here that says this content was exported on, you know, 406. Okay, so that is the, I know it's a very high level view, but essentially what I was able to show there is that you can have a process that aggregates data from multiple systems, interacts with your document management system, is intuitive enough to search and pre-populate information based on a specific lawyer, allows you to grab information for fields based on a specific system, clear AR automatically or clear processes automatically, as well as filter information to different people at different stages based on their responsibility level. You can do it at a group level, you can do it at a person level, as well as automated approaches and manual approaches to each system. Do you guys have any questions about that specific demonstration or have any comments about it?
It's Pat here.
Hey, Pat.
I think you've captured a lot of the, you know, the basic steps, and I certainly see a lot of room for, you know, additional tweaks and optimizations to that. What I'd kind of like to get a sense of then, I mean, so it's becoming clear to me that, you know, in a process like this, we would obviously model it, and once we had the model, establish connections, solid data sources, establish the workflow elements, and then we'd be basically writing small applications to address perhaps like the forms for the workflow on the way through, and kind of like a generic reporting view that I'll consider that. So is that accurate? Like is functionally, is that kind of what you did?
That is exactly what I did. Yep, that's exactly what I did. I built the forms out, and then I put my rules on the form. And once I had all that set, I said, okay, now I'm going to, you know, I'm going to create a workflow, and I'm just going to tack that on the end of the workflow. So one of the things that I want to do today is just show you how simple that can be. But as you guys know, it can be, you can make it as complex as you choose, right? So it can be very simple, but it can also be very complex.
Yeah, and I think depending
the way you approached it,
Pat, was required. Sorry?
I just said the way that you approached it is the way that I did approach this demonstration, yeah.
Right. And for some of these things, you know, obviously a much higher level of polish would be required if this was going to be interacted with by, say, all the people who might touch this process. You know, they might need a, you know, we might need to isolate the actual direction letter so you could click a link to see that document in DMS and actually preview it. Say, okay, yeah,
exactly.
That's a direction letter, you know, and those kinds of things. And I see all those possibilities are there. the main thing I'm interested in is kind of getting a handle or getting our heads around what it would take functionally and in terms of effort and everything else to approach a workflow and to say, okay, these are the basic pieces that we require. So we not only need to get the work done, we also need to be able to add a step on the end to enable us to visualize what work was done and report on it in a coherent kind of a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked, Pat. A few weeks ago we talked about how to keep it simple. So I think you specifically were talking about not getting too lost in the weeds when it came to integration with export management, and then I guess you wanted to. I guess the most important thing for you was to get a useful interface into the transactions, so you could see how it could be done. And like I say, it's a bit tough for Trevor to do a demo where he's pretending to be about 3 or 4 people, so his dashboards are a bit more full than they would otherwise be. But yeah, you can either, and that's the trick, I think, when it comes to designing a workflow like this, Trevor. Yeah. You've got to decide there's more than one way to do it, and the trick comes in doing it the most efficient way and doing it in the simplest way to start with, where you don't incur a lot of too much complexity, but you've got something you can build on if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the approaches that we take with clients is, a lot of people like fixed fee projects to, sort of have cost certainty, but in a project like this, I think in K2 in general, what I found is that the people who we work with generally pick it up fairly quickly, and so in the beginning stages, Arbro is sort of leading, and they are learning, and by the end of the project, they are actually leading and we are assisting. And so the capability to take on a lot of this work yourself as you go along, the more you learn, the less you will need Arbro. And so therefore, time and materials type engagements work very well here, because the risk is actually mitigated by the fact that you guys will be going along and saying, you know what, I can make my own view now. That's no problem. And you know what, if I want to tweak this little color scheme for a user, that I don't need Arbro for that. Okay, when it comes to Arbro Connect, maybe I need Arbro to set up the integration points, but once it's there, I'm pretty much going to just be asking general questions of them. And so what it allows you to do is actually own a lot of this on your own. And each workflow or application that you put into the system is obviously, as you can imagine, a variable time thing anyways. Because the more time you want to spend on the look and feel, the longer it could take. If you just can't get people happy with the color scheme, then maybe it's going to take you 10 hours just to get that part done. But the reality is the process and the back-end guts of it, it's really not that complex. It doesn't take a lot of time, depending on how in-depth you want to go with your automation. So that's the other caveat that can increase the time that it takes to implement the process. What I've also found is that firms will say to put a line in the sand and say, you know what, we need a process, we need the ability to track it, but K2 offers us the flexibility of changing our workflows in flight. So we could actually roll out the most simplistic process and improve on it as we go. Okay, guys, we did another iteration. You no longer have to update Adderant. The system's updating it for you now. The last step is gone. But until then, you got to update it. You got to go in and click the checkbox in K2, which will then fire it off to Adderant. Just things like that, which can allow you to quickly get processes off the ground while maximizing the amount of improvement you can get while minimizing the amount of downtime as you build the application. So it's more of an agile, you have an agile approach to your deployment model versus some other systems where you really have to have everything fit and finished before you can roll it out to users, and to change it's very, very tricky.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question, but...
No, I think so. With respect to there's a couple of threads that are questions that keep coming up for me. Because, as you said, I get the model as time and materials, and that makes some sense to me. I like the licensing model for the platform overall, and that it's a traditional sort of purchase plus maintenance as opposed to a fixed annual. But the questions that are coming up for me are, what are the potential things that will turn this into a money pit for us? And those things really, to me, they come down to the integrations and the ones that we don't have on the books. And I know it's difficult to speak to how long and how much effort and all those things, but for example, when we've been discussing integration platforms in general, we've been doing so for like a year and a half, 2 years, and some of that conversation came up in the context of our Aderant migration, prior to the point where we had agreed with the vendor for that product on services scope and professional services, things like that. There was some talk of could we get an integration platform of our own in place to supplant or support things that we might otherwise have to do as custom work in Aderant, and how easy or feasible would that be. Obviously the timing didn't work out for us to do that, but there's definitely a possibility that efforts to, for example, extend a platform like this into that world might compete with, or in some cases conflict with, efforts that are already underway there. So that's kind of a gotcha for us potentially, but I also see lots of other things, like every time we trip over, hey, we use our file transfer service to actually move these exported materials across to the end user who's departed. Can we use webhooks to get information to and from that service, if they publish methods by which to do so. So I could see lots of opportunities where these nice-to-have extensions could end up sucking us into further and further development time just to build these integrations. So that remains a big question for me that I don't know how to answer until we actually get our arms around the product and see it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have an answer for you either, right? Because you guys can take K2 as far as what's the limit, right? I mean, you can create a new smart object, a new service object, a web service object. It doesn't matter. So you can do that. You can interact with DMZ zones on different client sites. There's all kinds of things you can do. But like you say, the further you get into this really high level integration, the more time that's going to consume. And that's just why I mentioned at the beginning there that it is very beneficial to start maximizing the return on your investment in K2 by implementing a process that meets the needs but doesn't get carried away on the automation, and then roll out automation as you can, because it might be that you look at a process and say, you know what, I'd love it to look at the information from that from the export the site that we export our content to, but the reality for me is I would rather just switch my gears and go and do the onboarding process. And because right now that exporting process works well for me. We'll improve that after we have maybe 10 processes in flight that are, returning us on our investment, tenfold. Then we'll go and tackle that, because we'll be able to say, look, we took, hours out of your day, and we also implemented a huge amount of control to the process. So we are okay with spending that time and effort to modify that. Now I know that's obviously going without saying to you guys. You guys live and breathe this stuff, but just to kind of reiterate what you just said, Pat. It could take you as far as you'll let it go, and that can be time consuming depending on what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. To what extent does the product design interface allow you to, for example, maybe create not form templates necessarily, but the UI elements, for example? I can see certainly us spending a fair bit of time to set the stage there, but once that's done, I have no desire to take that any further. So spend the 10 hours or 20 hours to get that finalized and then apply that everywhere. I imagine that's baked in?
Yeah, it's baked in, yeah.
Okay.
So if you decide to go down the model of, look, we're going to create a specific Miller Thomson theme, then it's as easy as just building out your form and then applying that theme. Okay, so you can see that I have themes down here. So I have a couple themes that come out of the box. So if let's say I clicked on the lithium theme, you can see it totally changed the look and feel of that form. So that's just, you would design your theme to match your firm, and then that's what would you could just click that button. It would change it. Any form that you build therein would get that theme.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we should take a little look at the design environment. But before you do that, when I joined Arbro, I could see that they were already aligned with the K2. I sort of asked myself, why did they pick K2? And I went hunting, and the other systems out there that are competing, quite apart from Intap, which is another animal unto itself, are Nintex, which is pretty much SharePoint based, and it's AgilePoint. And I think Arbro, when I peeled away the layers, I found out the reason that Arbro attached themselves to K2, chose K2, was because the balance between usability, ease of use, and also power. Some of the systems like Nintex, you can get up and running with a workflow pretty darn quick. But when you start involving a number of integration points, number of systems, it starts to fall apart. That's what I studied and found out. And by the same token, you get onto other systems which are very difficult to use. And even though I think all the brochureware will tell you that they're, you can pretty much do anything, it just isn't true from what I discovered. And there was a couple of my clients out there who independently chose K2, which I think is interesting. So even though to a novice, when Trevor bounces around what seems to be quite a few screens here, I think on balance, it's a well-balanced product in terms of where the balance between ease of use and power and flexibility. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether it's worth, because on the agenda we put down here that if there's a little bit of time, is it worth jumping into the background, into the design environment a little bit and showing one or two more things, Trevor?
If they're okay with it, I would be happy to.
I think we'd benefit from that, and certainly we're all here, and it's on our minds. One other question before we get too deep into that. One of the things we would look to an integration solution to enable us to do would be to also draw together a lot of the middleware work that we're doing right now that doesn't necessarily have a lot of interface around it. So if we have a collection, for example, of some stored procedures, some scheduled jobs, a bunch of stuff running in SQL to just move bits around from A to B, I imagine that we could consolidate a lot of that work with the K2 platform, whether or not we slapped a great deal of interface on it. Correct?
Yep, that's it. That's absolutely right. So I'll show you a couple things. I'll show you the interface. I'll show you the so like where you build stuff. I'll show you where you administer it, or keep your eye on it, and then I'll show you how where you manage your smart objects. And in that situation, I'll show you how easy it is to incorporate stored procedures into K2 processes. Because quite frankly, I did just for ease of just for expediency's sake, I did use a few smart stored procedures in my demonstration that I just did. So I call a couple stored procedure to make some things happen. Okay, so here's the design interface. It's K2 Designer, and like all of K2, it's web-based. So you don't have to go to a server to develop it. You can just sit on your own machine and go to the web page, and then you can start working on it. And if you have the security to go in there, you can do so. So you've got your categories down the left-hand side, and they basically represent just the way in which you organize your firm's applications that you build. So for example, we did an ILTA demo, so we had a folder there, and we put all our application stuff in there. We're building a smart starter called Incept. We put that in there. And so onward and downward to Miller Thomson, where we have that item. So if I come into Miller Thomson, here's all the stuff that I actually created for you guys for this demonstration. I've got one workflow. I've got a couple of these ones with the blue and red. Those are my views that I created. I've got my pretend accounting system that I built so that it would be a completely separate system from everything else. I've got my views for my dashboards. I've got my dashboard landing page, so on and so forth. You can see the different icons represent the different things that I'm on, but of course over on the type you have the information too. And the work that you do actually is controlled kind of similar to iManage in the sense that it's check in and check out. So if Pat, you're working on building a form, and Marilyn's working on wants to work on that form, if they want to see your changes, you got to check it in, because when you check it in, that becomes the one that everybody sees when they're on the system. So again, obviously every model is different, and most firms do desire to have a development environment and then a production environment. The ability to package your application and move it from environment to environment is very robust with K2. They have a system where you just say, build my deployment package, and it says, what do you want to include in the deployment package? You click off the main items, and it actually goes and says, okay, well, for this to work, to package the offboarding dashboard, I need the offboarding matters, I need the offboarding matters list view, and it puts it all in. It thinks about all the interdependencies and builds your package for you, so you can just move it down the line to the next environment. But obviously, this is my demo environment, so I'm building on the fly, and I've got a whole bunch of forms checked out because I I don't have anybody else working on this with me. But one other point is if I have something checked out, when I go to the web page, I see the checked out copy. But if, Pat, you went to the web form, you wouldn't see it because it would be the last checked in copy that you see. Okay, so it just uses the check-in, check-out function. Probably spent a bit too much time explaining that. Okay, so let's just make a new category. So I'm going to just go through how easy it can be. So I'm going to create a category called vacation request form, and I'm just going to go in that. I'm going to create my new smart object. So this is like this is called a SmartBox smart object, and basically this is a smart object that gets created right in your K2 SQL environment. So I'm going to call this smart object vacation request, and I'm going to say that this smart object can be used in workflow, and I'm not going to get into the super advanced stuff. You can go and build it out and aggregate smart objects, but I'm just going to do a normal smart object and click next. And so what do I need from what do I need to be able to work with in this process? I might need to requester. I might want the request date. I'm going to say that this is going to be a date and time. Maybe I want to have duration. Well, maybe just turn that to an integer. Where's my integer? Whatever, I can't see it. There it is, number.
Number.
I got it. Yeah, I got it. Okay, and then I'm just going to say that's good enough for now. So I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to go to next, and I'm going to save that smart object. So now I have a smart object created with those fields available for me to interact with, and right away it takes me to the next screen and says, okay, well we have a smart object. What do you want to do with it? Well, I'm going to generate a view because I really don't want to play around with it, and it's going to be an item view. So, and I'm also going to generate a form for people to interact with. Okay. Say okay. So now I have my form. So I can actually go and do a couple things here. I can come into my view. Sorry, if I just go with my form here, let's see if I did that properly. Yeah. So you can see now I have an application that I can actually create records with. I mean, you could change the way it looks and stuff. I put the lithium theme on here, but I have the requester in this instance. I'm just going to write it down. I have a request date and I have a duration of my vacation. So now I want to I've got my form that people can interact with. I can now send them this link, and they can go and utilize that form. But it's not going to do much because it's just a form. All it's going to do is allow me to do those 4 things: save, checkout, edit. So I'm going to design a workflow. I'm going to attach a workflow to this. And it's going to come up and it's going to say, what do I want to do here? This is So now I'm going to add a step in here. So what can I do? I can approve it or I can reject it if I'm the approver. So maybe I'm the HR person for this one. So I'm going to use the vacation request form, and I'm not going to do anything fancy on this. I'm just going to click next, and then it's going to say when the start this activity when the form is initializing. Okay, and so I'll say who's actually going to get this. I'll say the originator is going to get it. And I'll click on and that's it. It's going to take all the field. It's going to say, dear whoever sent it, you have dear whoever's the approver, you have a link that you can go do. These are the things that you're allowed to do, and click finish. And so then it automatically gives me my list. So if I approve it, I want to send an email to the user. And if not, you get the idea. Sorry, keep working. You can also put you can put context browser, and you can put the the originator in here as well. You don't have to put an actual ID. And that's essentially it. So I have just created a vacation request form that allows me to submit items into the process. I just want to make sure that my my action of submitting the workflow was created properly. So I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to see if I have a way to click off the workflow. So when I click on save, it's going to submit the workflow to the person. Okay. So I can come in here and say, what information do I need to send into this? Maybe for the folio, I just want to call it, I just want to put some information from the vacation request form on there. So I can say put the ID on there. And that way I can keep track of what the item is that I'm looking at. So let's see if that's actually going to work in the 2 seconds that we just did that. So okay, so now I've just submitted that into my workflow. So now if I go to so now I would get an email. I would have the ability to go and approve that. If I approve it, I'll send along an item. I don't have a dashboard to go get that content right now. So let's say, let's see, do I have we should see that go up to 26. Yeah, this won't include that particular item, but I do have a formula. Yep. So now what I'll do is I'll just jump in and show you the administrator console. But that's how easy you can set up a workflow, a process with a workflow request, step by step. It didn't take too much. You saw it was all wizard driven. That information gets submitted into my system to work on, and I can actually work on that item and approve it. So I'm just going to add it to my.
Hey Marilyn, have you been building workflows with Lotus Notes?
Yes, most of the time.
Yeah. How is this looking in terms of when compared to what you're accustomed to?
Lotus Notes, the way I build mine, a lot of it is there are some. We don't work. Well, I don't work with wizards. I'm pretty sure you can, but I'm better off using codes. I'm more used to looking at codes than wizards.
Right, right.
Yeah, the wizards obviously offer some benefits. So Marilyn, I actually, in my old life when I worked at IBM, I developed a lot of workflows in K2 myself, or sorry, in Lotus Notes myself. So I'm quite familiar with doing that in Lotus Notes. And I don't know, my experience in the two has been that that anybody who can do it in Lotus Notes will eat this up for breakfast. Like you'll get in here and you'll be flying, because the skills between the Lotus Notes world and the K2, they're not the same. But the base that you get from developing in Lotus Notes and what you need to do sets you up very well for the processes that you need to go through in this system. Okay, but you can see there's my request, and I can now approve that vacation request or reject it. I'm going to reject it. I want them to keep working. So, but you get the idea. So there we have a workflow. It's now gone from my workflow list, and I should get an email shortly saying keep working. Okay, so I know that wasn't a really robust or complex thing that I just put together, but we did do it in 10 minutes. We do have a new business process in 10 minutes, right? And that's pretty powerful, I think. But again, it just depends on how far you're going to take it, right? Okay, let me just quickly go through the management console, because it is important to know that there is a very powerful back end to this server, which it's also web-based. It allows you to do things like, hey, you know what? I want to go see that process that I just worked on, because I want to see my vacation request form, which is down here. So vacation approval process, I have one instance of that. And so here it is. So I can actually go in and get a high level, or like it's not a high level, a in-depth view of everything associated to this item. I can see the view flow here. I can see what steps it went through. You can see that I've got an error on my email here. So I know, okay, well, that email didn't go out to that user. It's kind of convenient that that happened. So I can say, okay, what could my problem be? Obviously, I set this up, I staged this perfectly for this demonstration. So I can say, okay, well, I got a problem with that workflow. So I can actually come in here and say, oh, well, I need to fix that problem. What could the problem be? So I come into my workflow server and I say, what are the errors that I currently have in my workflow? Okay, well, oh, I see. My vacation request form didn't send the email because it's missing a parameter address. It can't be empty. Okay, well, I've been working with K2 for a while, so I actually happen to know that my from address is actually not accurate. So I can go ahead and change that and say, you know what, this isn't a real address. I'll change this to arbrodemoadmin@arbrodemo.com. And now that's the from address from this system that they'll receive. Okay, well, what does that mean to me? Well, now I can go to my vacation workflow request and check, actually from my error profile, I can actually do it too. So I can, from my error profile, say, you know what, I fixed that problem, I would like to retry that. And now that I fixed that issue, now I should actually really get my email. But I can see the process rights, who actually has the ability to work with this workflow, how many instances of it do I have, if I've changed the workflow, which versions of the workflow do I have. This is powerful because, you know, for example, when we're working on workflows here in our demo environment, the dev guy might upload something and then all of a sudden something for me breaks and I'm just about to go into a demonstration. Well, I can easily roll back the versions of the workflow so that the next time I click on it, I have the ability. And then also it shows me what are my steps and what can I do. So if I had, for example, our lawyer offboarding, I have multiple things I can do: client direction letter, AR, and exports. What are the things that I can do within that step? I can do confirm. Okay, so this is the logic around the back-end processing. So that's the workflow engine, but you can also go into your service objects and things like that. Okay, there's the reports, there's the user, what you can do licensing here, you can update your licenses, you can customize your notifications, you can create reports around the system. There's a whole bunch of things you can do in Workspace, but this is essentially where you can administer and see what kind of problems you're having, or even just generally how things are flowing through your system. So what the last thing I want to show you from an administration perspective is Smart Objects. So when you come in here, let me just collapse these sections. You can have this thing called Service Explorer, and these are all of the Smart Object services you have available to you. And when you build new ones, you get them added here, right? So under endpoint, under the web call, web service functions, we have our Arbro Connect, for example, right? So you set that up here. And under my SQL reporting services, I've created a couple of reporting services. So Axia, conflict search, file opening. I added my WSM library. And so what that allows me to do is say, if I connect to a table in a database, automatically allow me to interact with the tables and allow me to interact with the stored procedures. So in this case, I created one called Matters for Offboarding. And so from my K2 application, I call a Smart Object service, and it actually does that stored procedure. And then when you want to actually interact with it in your system, you just create the Smart Object right from here. And so it's all, like I said, it's intuitive, and it assesses what you should be able to do with that specific thing. So in this particular Smart Object, I have some things that come out of it, and I have some things that go into it. So I have parameters that go into it. And so when I go down to my Smart Object, since I created it, and go into default, there's my Matters for Offboarding. If I execute that Smart Object from here, I can see what it's looking for. It's looking for the lawyer, and it's looking for the ID. So the ID is an element that I'm going to pass through for a record. So if I pass through 7 and put in T-Bell, in this case, it's not. It shouldn't. Actually, it wasn't T-Bell, but you get the point. I can run this Smart Object here before I actually even get it into my K2 interfaces. Now it's available to me as soon as I launch it here. I can get it from my designer over here. Okay, so I don't want to, hopefully I'm not losing the audience, but I just wanted to show you that there are a bunch of places that you can administer this, and it's all very intuitive, and it's easy to interact with or work with. So if I wanted to, say, for example, add a new web call to this, I can just register the web service to this instance, and I can put in the information that I need for my service endpoint URL, etc. So here's where you would do all that stuff. So that's the sort of back-end build and administration console as it relates to K2. Pretty powerful.
Pat, when we started talking about this 2 or 3 months back, I think it was. I think we talked about lawyer onboarding. I think you were sort of suffering quite a bit with that. We're now talking about offboarding as well. Is onboarding still your challenge, or are there a number of things?
Well, there are a number of things. Those processes, though, the churn, that just continues to be a huge drag on operations. So there's certainly the same opportunity for time savings and effort savings exists there. That's something that Marilyn has been tasked with, in the absence of an integration platform to start actually moving stuff to, being tasked with sort of the process documentation and sort of mapping out how it's being done now so that we could largely reflect that in a new solution. That would be a starting point for us. But we would also look for some quick wins, to try and get something in place. And I very much like the model of get something functional in and then incrementally improve it. And I think that would meet with some success here.
Yeah, perhaps I could comment on that a little bit, because I've watched a couple of 2 or 3 other firms actually how they've approached workflow. And it's interesting, one of them got lost in the weeds with another vendor called Hyperion, and they spent almost a year building a new business intake system. And another firm spent, the first 20 or so workflows were involved around the finance system, in fact, Elite. And to me, I'm not crazy about that approach, because if it takes a long time to build the first humongous workflow, you kind of lose momentum. And I like quick wins too. So if you can build into a project like this the ability to do 1 or 2 or 3 small workflows that really help users out in the field as some end user benefits, then that's fantastic. In the meantime, it's a smart move to map out your more complicated workflows that might be really punishing you, and have that going on at the same time as well. But it's like any project. I think that's the whole workflow. There's a fear around workflow as to how do we get it in? Is it going to be a money pit? What about the integration points? There's a lot of questions. That's why the whole proof of concept sometimes comes into play, because you have a chance to prove it through. And but I agree with you. I wouldn't, if I was taking on workflow in a firm in your position, I would want to have some quick wins in there, so that you've got some user buy-in. You can see how easy it is to build. I mean, Trevor's just taken us through a vacation thing, but there's a lot more to it than that. You can imagine integrating with certain systems and what have you. But the intent is there to get the feel for the system. That was the purpose of it. But yeah.
No, it's definitely mission accomplished there. And I'm also seeing, there are cases in which if interface development is our roadblock, which it traditionally has been. We have lots of back-end systems wherein we can store and manipulate and move data around, but we always suffer for interface. And historically, we've relied on Lotus Notes to deliver an interface to users so that we can turn over the management of some of the key components to them. So for example, I'm thinking just off the cuff, a quick win might be basic vacation approvals like you just went through, Trevor. And I could see there being a necessity for us to, as soon as you expose a workflow like that, you put pressure on the underlying data that feeds the workflow. Manager relationships to staff. Are those all up to date and accurate? Are they being maintained currently so that anytime somebody puts in a vacation approval request, it's being routed to the right person? And that secondary requirement of making sure the data is up to date, well, right there would present us with an interface problem. Okay, we can create a data source for this, no problem. We can manipulate what we have without issue, but how do we put that in the hands of someone who doesn't have a SQL console in front of them and who isn't writing code to do that? And there's our interface issue. So I can see that this this platform would resolve some of that problem as well, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't seem like it would be a problem to just create a form or a view or whatever the terminology is to manipulate and store data directly without necessarily any workflow associated with it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So our interface problem and a lot of those secondary requirements, or those dependency requirements, could be addressed well with this kind of platform as well. And that's important for me, because all these roadblocks are just more time, more drag before we get an effective solution in front of people. And the more time we have to tell people, well, it's going to be another 6 months while we while we write that piece, that will kill this thing. So I very much need to be more nimble than that with this platform, and that's one of the goals going in, is that we should be able to demonstrate success fairly early and quite effectively.
Yeah, and you can see, so just from a personal perspective, you can see the email finally came in. So I actually, when I fixed that from email address, I spelt it wrong. So that's not going to be helpful. But I fixed it, and now you see the keep working email came in. So there's the closed loop on our 10-minute process we built. But I just wanted to show you guys one other thing, because I think it's also powerful. At least I find it to be powerful, because one of the things that firms really like about iManage is the fact that it is it allows them a sort of a centralized point for them to interact with their data. And so you can actually, you can see here, I'm in my iManage environment, and I click on a workspace, and I'm presented with a K2 form. In this case, you saw that I had that one matter, and I have a client direction letter outstanding for it. So I could actually interact with my workflows right here on this screen. Just, you can surface it in such a way that you can bring things together for users. Bit of a tangent. I remembered I did want to show you guys that before we closed off here. I know you guys were talking about something else, but it just brings it all together from your iManage environment. This is done by Arbor Launch.
Right, and you're running a client app in order to enable that.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct.
Okay.
Good question, Pat. Where is your vacation data stored now? Is it in a particular system, or is it in your own homegrown system?
It's in a bespoke system in Lotus Notes right now.
Okay.
Like many other things in our environment.
That's the biggest challenge, isn't it? Is to when do you buy something off the shelf? Because I worked at a couple of law firms who actually bought a vacation system, something to handle vacations. So when do you buy something off the shelf, and when do you build something yourself? I mean, that's the biggest challenge, is where the balance comes in. And I think the tendency nowadays is to get off the shelf as much as possible. But it's interesting with a system like this, once you get the hang of it, and I think Lotus Notes has always had a reputation of being a great system. I worked in a Lotus Notes environment too, and it's had a great reputation out there. So you can actually do a lot with it and get stuff done relatively quickly, I think. So I think the impact of being able to put together a workflow such as a vacation request system or something else in a matter of weeks and getting in front of users is pretty powerful, and actually builds a lot of credibility when maybe you're working on something much bigger. And that's oftentimes where I see the whole workflow projects get shut down, is because they start as a humongous thing that's in the background. People know it's in there. It costs a lot of money to put it in. It takes a long time to get used to it. And if you're not careful, it dies on the vine. I think law firms are littered with systems which are on the shelf, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, that never really reach their potential. And it comes down to, I think oftentimes these are really good tools, but it comes down to how you approach that project. Are you getting the right balance of ease of use, power, and are you bringing it on in the right way in terms of training, support, and what are you actually building into the project? So the devil's very much in the details, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? Would you like me to get some more information for you?
Right now, I think we have enough food for thought to take that back and have an internal discussion. I would like you know, a link to this presentation if you can provide it to me, so that if we want to rewatch any portion of it or sort of review it again, a lot of material. But for the main part, I think we need to now review and discuss as we approach a decision point on this stuff. And I think we have enough for now, but we'll come back